Before the silence came, there was fire, not the kind that warms homes or lights the way. No, this was sacred fire, untamed, venerated, and feared. Deep in the mountainous heart of what is now a forgotten land, an ancient people carved a city into the stone, ringed by volcanoes and cloaked in sulfur-rich mists. The people called their kingdom Xatalma, which in their tongue meant the heart that burns. To outsiders, it was an impossible city. Suspended above rivers of molten rock, it shimmered in the volcanic haze like a mirage, a place of terrifying beauty. Lava-heated aqueducts carried steam throughout marble halls. Temples, coated in obsidian and ash, towered over the populace. Everything was black, gold, and red. Fire was not only their tool, it was their god. And for a time, fire rewarded them. The Xatalmans were brilliant engineers, artists, and warriors. Their trade routes reached thousands of miles. Gold flowed freely. Crops, nourished by mineral-rich soil, fed a booming population. Their priests claimed it was proof they had tamed the gods of flame. Their ruler, Emperor Uralzar, proclaimed himself the voice of the volcano. He declared that as long as the sacred fire was honored, the kingdom would never fall. But even then, the foundations trembled. Beneath the glittering power and pride, something simmered. The earliest myths of Xatalma warned of a pact sealed with blood, a bargain forged long before their golden age. But those texts were outlawed, burned. The temples replaced them with new scripture. Only the fire matters, they said. All else is heresy. Yet in the hidden corners of the empire, older voices still whispered. Priests who studied forbidden scrolls. Shamans who claimed the fire was not a blessing, but a prison. And a growing number of citizens who began to feel watched. Because the mountains were no longer silent. Reports came of tremors that didn't match the usual volcanic activity. Strange figures seen on mountaintops during storms. Animals found mutilated in precise, ritualistic patterns. Children born with burns already etched into their skin. Still, the emperor demanded faith. In his 67th year, Emperor Uralzar ordered the construction of the Eclipse Temple, the largest religious site the empire had ever built. It was said to sit directly over the mouth of the world, a vent that led into the planet's heart. The air around it shimmered with unnatural heat. Workers began dying from hallucinations. Entire construction crews vanished. When asked, the emperor replied only, "The gods are waking." Soon after, the capital city saw the rise of a secret priesthood. They wore no colors, only cloaks of ash. They bore symbols that did not match the empire's current religion, and their chants did not belong to this age. Some historians believe these priests had uncovered what had been hidden, an ancient rite, one banned for centuries. But why resurrect it? Here's where it turns. In the third year after the Eclipse Temple's completion, the empire experienced its first real drought in over a century. Crops failed. Steam aqueducts burst. Citizens whispered that the gods were angry. And then came the dreams. Tens of thousands across the kingdom claimed to see the same vision. A woman of ash, walking through fire, pointing at the volcano. Her voice was silent, but her eyes bled smoke. Those who saw her woke with burned hands. Panic spread. The emperor, now frail and mad-eyed, gathered the ash priests. They locked themselves in the Eclipse Temple for 9 days. When they emerged, they carried with them an obsidian tablet covered in ancient glyphs. They called it the Covenant of Flame. No record survives of its exact contents. But we know this: it described a ritual, a sacrifice, and a promise. The promise? The drought would end. The gods would be pleased. The empire would rise again, greater than before. The cost? Only a dozen lives. And so, under a blood-orange sky, the preparations began. Most of the population never even knew. The ritual would take place during the next lunar eclipse, deep within the temple. Only the emperor, the high priests, and the selected few would witness it. But those who lived near the temple, they heard things. Screams that echoed like wind through stone, chanting in a language older than human memory. And something else, something no one could quite describe. rising from the earth, something watching. The ritual was no longer secret. It had become a shadow over the entire kingdom. And then the eclipse came. It began the moment the moon turned red. Not pink, not orange, red like blood suspended in the sky. In Xatalman belief, a red eclipse was not a celestial event. It was a door, a passage between worlds. And on that night, the door was opened from the other side. The eclipse temple was sealed shut with molten gold. No one could enter. No one could leave. Inside, the ash-robed priests formed a circle around the obsidian tablet, each holding relics unearthed from tombs older than their civilization. 12 chosen victims knelt at the center. Not criminals, not heretics. These were offerings of purity, young, unblemished, hand-selected from noble bloodlines. According to scattered texts discovered centuries later, they were drugged, but not unconscious. Their eyes remained open. The priests chanted for hours, not in Xatalman, but in a guttural, rasping tongue that grated against the ears of those outside. Stone cracked. Birds fell dead mid-flight. Dogs howled across the capital. And then, at the eclipse's peak, the high priest raised a blade of obsidian fused with human bone and spoke a name. A name never recorded. A name believed to belong not to a god, but to something older. Something sealed beneath the volcanoes since before Xatalma was built. With each sacrifice, the volcano rumbled louder. The air thickened. Witnesses from miles away claimed the sky dimmed, though it was not yet night. The final scream didn't echo. It vanished as though swallowed. And then silence. For a moment, the capital believed it had worked, that the blood had pleased the gods. The winds calmed. The volcano stopped rumbling. The temperature cooled by 2 degrees. And for 3 days, the sun returned. Rain fell. The emperor declared it a divine victory. Statues of the sacrificed were built. Ash-cloaked priests were elevated to divine messengers. The forbidden rite was no longer whispered, it was praised. But then came day 4. The rain didn't stop. It turned black. Sticky, acidic, and smelling of rot. The rain poisoned the soil. Crops withered overnight. People drank from their cisterns and began vomiting blood. Livestock ran into fire pits as if driven mad. The skies, once cleared, turned dark as twilight and stayed that way. And then came the dreams again. Only this time, they weren't shared. They were personal, intimate, brutal. People saw themselves burning, not by fire, but by something inside them. They woke screaming, clawing at their own skin, claiming something was trying to get out. Those who survived longer spoke of a voice in their minds, deep, feminine, but fractured, like stone grinding against stone. The same voice repeated one phrase, "You promised me the gate." By the end of the week, hundreds were dead, but not by sickness, by madness. Mothers drowned their children in fountains. Priests tore their own eyes out and carved symbols into their skin. One senator was found impaled on a temple spire, with no clear explanation of how he got there. The emperor, once so proud, vanished. Some say he fled to the mountains. Others claim he walked into the eclipse temple and never returned. The ash priests, now hunted by terrified mobs, locked themselves away once more, this time in silence. But it was too late. Earthquakes began in waves, not natural tremors, but rhythmic, as if something beneath the surface were moving, shifting, and then something rose. Reports, though fragmented, suggest that from the mouth of the great volcano, a pillar of black flame erupted, silent, cold, and spiraling with ash. Not smoke, ash. And in it faces. Thousands watched it burn into the heavens and fall back to earth, disappearing before it touched the ground. The next day, the dead began rising, not in the flesh. Their images, etched in ash on the sides of buildings. Perfect, detailed outlines of people who had died during the ritual or the chaos after. Entire walls blackened with their shadows, frozen mid-scream. And wherever their images appeared, more people died. Not by war, not by fire. They simply stopped, collapsed, their hearts hollowed, blood gone, eyes open. No enemy was ever seen. The priesthood tried to flee, but found their feet melted into stone. The temples they built turned against them, swallowing them in molten cracks. A final cryptic journal from a scholar named Harold Xatalma, one of the last literate men in the city, described it best: "We did not call the gods. We call what came before gods. The fire is not holy. It is hunger. We were not chosen. We were bait." By the next full moon, only 1/3 of the population remained. Most fled the city, but they did not get far. Those who crossed the outer valley were met by a new phenomenon: the burning wind. A soundless gust that would rise at random, leaving only blackened bone and a ring of scorched earth. Entire refugee caravans vanished in moments. Worse still, those who escaped the wind spoke of voices beneath the soil. They claimed the land itself was now alive, not in a metaphorical sense, but in pain. It groaned. It cracked. It opened and closed like a breathing thing. And through it all, that same voice: "You promised me the gate." By the end of the second month, no one dared speak the name Xatalma. Maps were redrawn. Mountains renamed. Travelers were warned never to go east. And yet, something lingered. Because in that desolate valley, beyond the reach of time, the Eclipse Temple still stands. Untouched, unweathered, its gates sealed with obsidian. The fires beneath it long extinguished. But once a year, on the anniversary of the eclipse, a low, haunting hum can still be heard, like a song beneath the earth, a lullaby sung by something waiting. And what exactly was it waiting for? That is where the horror begins to spread. By the time the next lunar eclipse approached, only a fragment of the once glorious Xatalman civilization remained. Scattered, starved, and broken, survivors had abandoned the capital. Temples were empty. Statues lay toppled in streets filled with ash. But one structure still glowed faintly from within: the Eclipse Temple. Always sealed, always silent, yet now pulsing. Scholars have long debated whether a second ritual was ever performed. But fragments of recovered bone tablets suggest a terrifying truth: it wasn't performed again. It never stopped. The first ceremony had not sealed a bargain. It had opened a channel. The deaths weren't sacrifices. They were fuel. And once the rite had begun, it could not be undone, not unless the channel was closed. And closing it, they learned, would cost far more than lives. Across what remained of the empire, people began to speak in unison. Not together, but word for word identical sentences, whispered in places where no one else could hear. The moon will bleed again. The gate will widen. Entire towns emptied overnight. Not for migration, but disappearance. Clothes remained. Meals sat uneaten. Doors were left open. There were no bodies. Only footprints and ash that walked in every direction, and then stopped. Meanwhile, in the abandoned capital, the mountain itself began to shift. Not erupt, move. The volcano known as Xatalma, once revered as the holy mountain, now glowed from within. Not with fire, but with something blue. Ethereal. Wrong. Birds that flew near it burst into flame. Rocks hovered, weightless above its rim. And still, the hum grew louder. Back in the ruins, a solitary figure arrived. A former priest named Veth, one of the few who had fled before the first ritual. His journal, found buried under what remained of a monastery 400 miles away, is the only first-hand account of what came next. He returned not to pray, but to stop what had begun. According to his writing, Aram believed that the ritual had not just awakened an ancient force. It had begun to replace reality itself. The dreams, the voices, the burning wind were symptoms of a world being rewritten from below. In the days leading to the second eclipse, Aram watched the capital become something else. Streets twisted at impossible angles. Shadows moved without light. Ash on the ground began to form symbols, vast, precise, drawn by an unseen hand. Buildings wept blood. Time stuttered. Aram wrote, "I stood beneath the sun and saw it blink. When it opened again, it was night. But the most horrifying sight came 3 days before the eclipse. The sacrificed returned, not as flesh, not as ghosts, but as echoes. 12 identical figures stood in the plaza, mouths sewn shut, eyes weeping obsidian. They did not move, did not breathe, but their presence bent the air around them, and at their feet the stone cracked in the shape of an ancient sigil, the same one found on the obsidian tablet used in the first rite. They were not alive. They were anchors. That night, Aram attempted to destroy the Eclipse Temple. He gathered relics, oils, and fire, but the structure rejected him. Each match snuffed out. Each torch went cold. And then, the voices returned. Only this time, they weren't in dreams. They were inside him. He wrote, "They showed me what lies on the other side. It has no shape, no name, only hunger." It was not summoned. It was released. He ran, but even that was not escape. Because when the second eclipse began, the world itself convulsed. Across the continent, night fell during daylight. Tides surged backward. Stars shifted position. Entire forests burned without fire. And from the summit of Mount Solnamath, a scream unlike any sound ever recorded erupted, lasting 7 full minutes. Witnesses 500 miles away claimed they heard it in their bones. Then silence. Not quiet. Absence. A vacuum of sound so deep it caused birds to fall mid-flight. No echo. No wind. Only one word, whispered once, through every survivor's mind. Enter. And the gates of the Eclipse Temple opened. Not by hand. Not by force. By will. Within it, nothing was the same. No longer a structure of stone and obsidian. It was now a corridor. Black walls that pulsed like living skin. Symbols that changed when looked at. And at its heart, something floating. A sphere of molten ash spinning silently. It's believed this was the true gate. A tear in reality itself. The result of a ritual that defied nature, gods, and time. And in front of it knelt the 12 echoes, silent, waiting. What happened next is lost. Aram's final entry reads, "I saw it open. I saw what came through. I am not me anymore." That page was stained in ash, with no further words. But from that moment on, everything accelerated. Animals turned inside out. Mountains melted into valleys overnight. Water turned to smoke. Entire sections of the world's crust vanished. And the capital imploded. Not from bombs. Not from volcanoes. From within. As if reality itself folded inward. In one breath, the city was gone. Where it stood, now only a perfect circle of blackened earth, 3 miles wide. Nothing grows there. Nothing echoes. And no satellite image can capture the center. Because there is no center. Just absence. And yet, there are whispers. In the centuries that followed, locals told stories. Of hearing chants in the distance on eclipse nights. Of seeing shadows that don't match the people casting them. Of children disappearing during red moons, leaving behind only a ring of ash. And in every tale, one element returns. A woman of fire and ash. Her eyes bleeding smoke. Her mouth unmoving. And a message, the ritual is not over. The fall of Xatalma wasn't a collapse in the traditional sense. There were no foreign armies. No rebellion. No plague that could be tracked. What happened was far worse, an erasure. Across neighboring lands, emissaries tried to make contact. Caravans sent toward the capital never returned. Birds that flew eastward vanished from the sky. No smoke, no ruins, no movement. And so, the world moved on, or tried to. But Xatalma did not stay buried. Within decades, travelers began reporting strange phenomena near the former borderlands. Compasses failed. Fires wouldn't burn. Time seemed distorted. A 3-day journey might take 1 hour, or 7 weeks. In one chilling account, a group of shepherds found a field where the sun never rose, even as dawn lit the skies everywhere else. The land had become fractured, not physically, but existentially. And then came the return of the chosen. Not the 12 echoes seen before, but something far more widespread. In distant towns, places untouched by the ritual, children began speaking in foreign tongues, drawing symbols in ash. One girl in the north was found building a model of the Eclipse Temple out of bones, though no one had told her it existed. These weren't hallucinations. They were memories. Memories that didn't belong to them. Memories of the ritual, of the scream from the mountain, of blood turned to fire. The knowledge spread like infection. Whispers passed from child to child, even across regions that hadn't heard of Xatalma in centuries. And then came the resonance deaths. They began subtly. A man digging in his field felt the earth breathe. He collapsed. A merchant in the west saw the moon turn black during daylight. He screamed until his throat ruptured, and still kept screaming. Each case was different, but the symptoms were the same. They saw something they were not supposed to see, and their bodies could not contain it. A new class of priests emerged, fearful imitators of the ash-robed ones, desperate to contain what was spreading. They burned books, banished children, built shrines of silence. But they didn't realize something terrifying. The ritual had spread beyond the bloodline. You didn't need to be Xatalman to be affected. You only had to know. Knowledge had become the curse. Even speaking the name Xatalma became taboo. It was said to mark the speaker. Those who said it 3 times were found in the morning burned from within, their skin unscorched, their hearts reduced to black dust. And still, the gate pulsed beneath the earth. No army could reach it. Every expedition sent to rediscover the city failed. Maps changed. Satellites glitched. The land itself rejected observation. Even the most advanced sensors returned only white noise, until one mission got too close. In the late 20th century, a deep Earth research team drilled into the crust near the suspected location of the capital. They were searching for geothermal energy. What they found instead was a void. Their instruments showed a massive cavern, miles wide, with no echo, no heat signature, and no geological explanation. Within 24 hours of discovery, the entire team, 15 scientists, disappeared. Their last transmission was garbled, but one word was clear: it's waking. That's when modern scholars began to see the pattern. Every few centuries, during a blood moon eclipse, something happens. Earthquakes with no epicenter. Entire islands sinking overnight. Children born without eyes, yet who speak in fluent, dead languages. And always the voice returns. You promised me the gate. But perhaps the most disturbing revelation comes from linguists who decoded fragments of the original obsidian tablet. According to their translation, the ritual performed by Xatalma was never meant for protection. It was not even a bargain. It was a summons, not of gods, but of the beforeworld, a concept that appears in multiple ancient mythologies, something older than time, older than gods, a plane of pure entropy, a realm where logic, physics, and identity collapse, and most terrifying of all, a sentient hunger that does not invade worlds. It waits for an invitation, and Xatalma gave it one. They didn't vanish. They weren't destroyed. They were consumed, down to their last echo, digested into the impossible. The final records of Aram Veth contain this passage, scratched in a stone with what appears to be a fingernail. I can hear their laughter. The sacrificed. They sing to it now. They are not gone. They are part of it. And it is so hungry. Modern analysis of the site, what little can be gathered, shows strange anomalies in the magnetic field. Gravity warps by fractions of a percent. Sound dies inside a perimeter that expands every few decades. It's as if the edges of the world itself are fraying. Still, world governments stay silent. Researchers vanish. Conspiracy theories rise. But none explain why the place where Xatalma stood still breathes. Because even now, there are signs that the before world isn't just beneath us. It's coming through us. The phenomenon known as mirror bleed, reflections behaving incorrectly during eclipses, not mimicking reality, but showing something else. Cities with black skies, people without faces, eyes watching from behind glass, and always the woman of ash. Always near, never moving, waiting. For what? That's what keeps historians awake. Not what happened to Xatalma, but what might happen again. Because rituals are not one-time events. They're cycles. And the final part of the tablet, translated just last decade, offers one final warning. A phrase repeated 33 times. The first gate opens by blood, the second by memory, the third by witness. There are places on this planet where silence holds memory. Not just absence of sound, but a hush so deep it feels alive. Where birds avoid the sky. Where no insect crawl. Where the wind moves, but nothing bends. These are not haunted places. They are marked. And the place once called Xatalma is the darkest of them all. Modern satellite scans show nothing but a blackened basin, roughly 3 miles across, shaped like a perfect circle. No vegetation, no radiation, no anomalies that could be explained by any natural science. But there's something wrong with the light. Photographs taken during aerial flyovers often show shadows that don't align with the sun's position. Sometimes they don't align with anything. And within the center of the basin, sensors record a slight downward pull, something gravitational, something impossibly deep. It's as if the Earth is remembering something it should have forgotten, and the signs haven't stopped. Every few years, during blood moons or rare eclipses, reports surface sudden hallucinations. Lost time, mass dreams, people waking up covered in ash that can't be traced, children speaking in the long-dead language of the Xatalman priests. Sometimes, just one word is spoken. Soon, but soon is relative. Because what Xatalma began was never confined to one place. The before world, if it exists, isn't a distant dimension. It's adjacent, parallel, pressed against our reality like breath on glass. The ritual didn't open a gate to bring something in. It weakened the veil. It made the membrane thinner. It made this world vulnerable. And that weakness spreads, not like fire, not like plague, like memory, because memory, once shared, cannot be taken back. And now you've heard it. You know the name. You've heard the words. You're a part of the witness phase. This is the terrifying implication buried in the last fragments of Aram Veth's journal. After his descent into the ritual chamber and his encounter with the gate, he writes nothing for weeks. Then, in an almost childlike scrawl, a single line appears. You can't unknow the scream. It echoes that same phrase found in the obsidian ritual tablet. The third gate opens by witness. Historians once believed that the first gate, the one opened by the blood of the 12 sacrifices, was the greatest sin of Xatalma. They were wrong. The second gate, opened by collective memory, by dreams, by knowledge, by echoes passed down for centuries, allowed the before world to anchor itself across generations. But the third gate is the most terrifying of all, because it needs no ritual, only awareness. The before world doesn't want worship. It doesn't demand blood anymore. It simply needs you to understand it exists, and that may already be enough. Think of the stories told in hushed tones. Explorers disappearing in ash deserts with smiles carved into their faces. Deep-sea divers finding city-shaped shadows on the ocean floor that don't match any structure on Earth. A man in Germany who screamed for 9 hours straight, claiming he had fallen between the walls. Or the famous photograph from 1978, a mountaineer last image before his death. It shows a temple, obsidian, circular, and a figure of a woman with no face standing beneath a red moon. The gate has never closed, because it cannot be closed. The before world is not a visitor. It is a truth, a dormant presence that existed before time, before gods, before structure. Xatalma didn't vanish. It didn't die. It simply passed through the veil and became part of what waits beyond. And now, more than ever, it calls back. Not in fire or madness, but in resonance. You feel it when your reflection blinks out of sync. When you dream of a place you've never been, black rock, red sky, and chanting in your bones. When a child hums a song with no origin. When an eclipse lasts just a second too long. These are not coincidences. They are invites. There is one final passage found in a sealed vault, hidden beneath what is now a military exclusion zone near the former Xatalman border. It was carved by a different hand, perhaps not even human. Its language had to be dream-translated through a process that can't be fully explained. But the message is unmistakable. We did not vanish. We're watching from the other side of the skin. We are not waiting to return. We are waiting for you to open the door from within. And so, we ask again, what truly happened to Xatalma? It was not destroyed. It was not cursed. It was not forgotten. It was fulfilled. The ritual worked. And now it continues. Because you've heard it. You've imagined it. You've stepped toward the gate, even if just in thought. And the before world never needed more than that. So next time the moon bleeds red, and the ash rises on a windless night, and the silence feels just a little too deep, don't answer. Don't turn around. Don't listen to the voice that sounds like your own, calling you by name. Because the third gate is already opening. And this time, it's not a city that will vanish. It's everything.